The opening words are these the longer version of the Glasgow motto, let Glasgow flourish, but Lord, let Glasgow flourish by the preaching of the word and praising of thy name. And now a few words by way of introduction, a reading from that important journal of record, Glasgow Unitarians News and Views, from the month of October, just past. St. Mungo and the Unitarians. In this 850th anniversary year of Glasgow's Borough Charter, Unitarians have recently recovered two very definite 19th century connections with the city's patron saint. The new Unitarian Church poster, now on show downstairs at Unitarian House, advertises the opening of the Great Dove Hill Chapel on Sunday, 10th October, 1858. None of us seems to have heard before of a Unitarian chapel being in Great Dovehill Street in Glasgow's East End. The Glasgow anecdote about the rising by the saint of the miraculous mound at Dovehill off the Gallowgate was read in our Sunday evening service in September in honour of the recent rediscovery of our past. The second connection is with Ross Street Church, the Unitarian church we have all heard about in the Eastern District. Margaret Paxton's history mentions that the Ross Street Church building was erected in 1876 and closed in 1947. Ross Street is south of Gallowgate and could be described as a continuation of the North Side Street, which is Great Dovehill Street. However, the Ross Street Church and the Great Dovehill Chapel did not share the same site, but they do share in St. Mungo's memory, as Kerr Jameson informs us. Ross Street, prior to 1905, was named South St. Mungo Street. Now, I started talking about the patron saint, and this service at root is about our approach and our reaction to Christianity. Ours is an active Unitarian Christian church to the extent that each of you decides to make it so. Wisely, I think, we're quite wary about that because of the damage done under the Christian name. There is light and shade on this topic. I was quite struck. We were shown, Ali sent round a General Assembly newsletter, and I was reading about the Brum Unitarians. And I thought, might they call themselves the Brum Unitarians of New Meeting? And that's a very old name, New Meeting, going back to the 18th century. But in the 19th century, in the high 19th century until the 1970s, their church, the equivalent of the St. Mark's of Birmingham, was the Church of the Messiah, and a famous church it was. So, looking at the Green Book, I felt perhaps the outstanding, the Unitarian Christian hymns that appears is number 110, written by the comparatively then young Clifford Reid, and it's a book published in 1985. I think we noticed when we saw the recording of the inaugural service in Glasgow Unitarian Church here in this building in 1983, the language is different from, it's the same place, but the language is slightly different, the tone slightly different. And I thought it would be interesting if we read this hymn number 110, and Alison Spurway is going to read this to us.
Jesus died, but Christ has triumphed. Broken now the chains of death. From the tomb comes God's anointed, kindling cold hearts with his breath. Now at last we see his purpose, breaking through like sunburst bright. Liberation for God's people ends humanity's long night. For there is a spirit greater, who has now the victory, and our God indwells the human striving for our liberty. And that spirit dwelt in Jesus, teaching us that love redeems, how God, through a man's compassion, gains great ends by human means. But for love and life undying, death of self must be the key. Jesus died to bear this witness, and Christ rose to make us free.
I was very struck by the words, the death of self, and the spirit of God, the spirit that is focused as having been seen in Jesus. Well, I suppose I'm starting to address you on an address which I've entitled Address. Well, Glasgow is the postal address, 614 Anno Domini, or Common Era. Does it really matter how we put it? The Church of Scotland is in crisis. There's a collapse in numbers of members and of people attending. And the national church would face another crisis if the numbers suddenly go up. What do I mean? Entryism. Unite the Kingdom rallies, Christian nationalism, that wish to put a rhetorical punch into engagements with those of other religions. And white Christian nationalism, do we mean that? I think we're afraid of that. Were you satisfied with the proofs recently adduced in the press that Nigel Farage, NF, as a 17-year-old boy of some consequence at his public school, was reputed a racist bully? And he might be the next prime minister, so they say. I remember what he said in the European Parliament after the Brexit vote. The UK referendum vote to leave was known. It was about that day. I've not looked it up as a recording. I remembered it. I saw it. I remembered it. And he said to the European members of Parliament, when I first came here, you were laughing at me. Well, you're not laughing now. It is no laughing matter either, in my opinion, that the United Kingdom is not a full member of the European Defence Union at such a time of peril as this, when it is not inconceivable that the United States is heading to a second civil war, and in that calamity that Russia would pounce upon a NATO country. Nor is it inconceivable that even sooner the United States would have pounced upon the territory of another NATO country. On last Wednesday, 7th January, Renee Nicole Good, a US citizen, was fatally shot at close range by a US Immigration and Customs Enforcement agent in Minneapolis. This year, I'll have been 40 years a law enforcement officer in Glasgow. And usually I welcome politicians supporting an officer of law in difficult circumstances. Not so with J.D. Vance last Thursday. An attack on law and order, he said, had been carried out by the person who died, by a domestic terrorist. Well, maybe you've seen the recordings of that woman's last words. Hey, dude, I'm not mad at you. Those words couldn't have terrified anyone, far less should it have terrified a federal agent. She died for some other reason. In the United States on Thursday, an editorial in the National Catholic Reporter, so I noticed, stated that the Vice President's comments, I'm quoting this, comments justifying the death of Renee Good are a moral stain on the collective witness of our Catholic faith. The writer of that, I might say, as did Pope Francis last Easter also perhaps, was seen to flee from Vance, whose, and this is a quote from that Catholic Reporter's article last week, whose Catholicism seems to be little more than a political prop, a tool only for his career ambitions and desire for power. Well, I wouldn't go cheating in the metaphysics exam that we face all the time by looking into the soul of the boy sitting next to me. But if Christianity is a good thing, the National Catholic Reporter's piece is right that J.D. Vance expressed a wrong-headed view of Christianity. Other online comments I've been noticing. On Thursday, 82% of white evangelicals voted for Trump. Renee was, says the person, I don't know who the person is who put this posting, was murdered by a fascist government, brought in on the back of a gullible Christian voting bloc. And another post, I don't know who it is who wrote, I'm just quoting it as I noted it. I was raised in a fundamentalist Christian cult, but got out of it. The filter through which these Christians see the world is warped in the most extreme way. I have empathy for some because I know many who have goodness deep inside. Eventually, though, they must face the reality that they have aided in bringing about a terrible situation. MAGA Christians are the reason Jesus wept, wrote the poster of that. Well, who knows? But the message to US citizens by what both Vance and Trump have said or written after that shooting was, in effect, I suggest this: obey or we shoot. The 9th of January posted message that moved me most was this: I'm an atheist, but something Renee's wife said really struck me. And then quoting the wife, Renee was a Christian who knew that all religions teach the same essential truth. We are here to love each other, care for each other, and keep each other safe and whole. And then the writer of the post continues, that's exactly the kind of religious dialogue that is so desperately needed. I suppose this next bit is a bit like a continuation on the theme of patron saint. My next quotation, unlike the last few, the ones that I was getting from the internet of people posting from last Wednesday onwards, is attributed to a very long-serving church minister who was first a Methodist, but then became Reformed Church in America 10 years later, and followed a 52-year career from 1932 onwards as the senior pastor at New York's Marble Collegiate Church, almost 400 years old. I think it will be in 2 years' time. A very big-looking church, and no doubt with much to celebrate, and it does celebrate much. Anyway, quoting this person, you have your way to God, and I have mine. I found eternal peace in a Shinto shrine. God is everywhere. Christ is one of the ways. The words of the Reverend Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, pastor of that church, spoken in an interview. The writer of the article in which I came across those words cited quoted them in proof that Peale denied the very heart of the Christian faith and replaced it with his own doctrine. But what he said to us there is very much in line with what with which we would agree. Since the mid-19th century, Glasgow Unitarian Church members, under the progressive influence, one might say, of James Martineau, have seen the seat of religious authority as the enlightened conscience of the individual rather than in biblical authority. So I think as I please, and that gives me pleasure. We sing with great pleasure, don't we? This puts a huge responsibility on our consciences and on the meaning of enlightenment. In 1952, Norman Vincent Peale published The Power of Positive Thinking. It has sold millions of copies. It's a classic of the self-help books of the genre, and I mean sort of 1936 Dale Carnegie, 1937 Napoleon Hill. Do I include Donald Trump, 1987, The Art of the Deal? I haven't read his book, but I wonder if it's of that, would it be said to be of that same genre? These are all publications that have had great worldly success. And Peale, I'm suggesting, is perhaps a bit of a patron saint to some of his readers. Now, I've noted down 10 rules, helpful rules for overcoming our, as individuals, our feelings of inadequacy. These are Peale's 10 recommended rules. He doesn't say commandments, but we'll call them rules. 1, picture yourself succeeding. 2, think a positive thought to drown out a negative one. 3, minimize obstacles. 4, don't attempt to copy others. 5, repeat, if God be for us, who can be against us? 10 times every day. 6, work with a counselor. 7, repeat, I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. 10 times every day. 8, develop a strong self-respect. 9, affirm that you are in God's hands. And 10, believe that you will receive power from God. Well, those are the 10 rules, and many people who've read that book will have felt much strengthened and made more positive in their lives. The point of interest here is that was the minister that Donald Trump was listening to Sunday after Sunday. I got a clip of Donald Trump on the golf course, and he's quoted as saying, the greatest thinker I ever witnessed was Dr. Norman Vincent Peale. He was the minister who officiated at Trump's first wedding. And we can see what was the effect of Christianity in the household of Donald Trump. He learned at least something from his church attendances: self-belief. No amount of positive thinking can keep me from a negative conclusion to all of this, that Trump plus Peale has equaled a bad thing, to use the 1066 historical terminology. Self-belief can lead, as Trump's Art of the Deal ghostwriter Tony Schwartz puts it, hauntingly, to lying being second nature. The problems around self-belief have never been more clear. An American friend of mine, Hank, in North Carolina, wrote to me on Friday, quoting the New York Times article from that morning. President Trump views his power to command world affairs as vast, almost unchecked. He told 4 White House reporters on Wednesday evening that he, not international law or treaties, would be the arbiter of any limits to his authority. Asked if there were any restraints on his global powers, he answered, yeah, there is one thing, my own morality, my own mind. It's the only thing that can stop me. What do we do to save the world? This is going to be quite a short service, but I've raised big things for us to talk about over tea and coffee. What do we do to save the world? Well, I have a plan. 1, urge Denmark and Greenland cunningly, temporarily, to rename Greenland Epstein Island. That would keep it safely out of the US news for good, for just long enough from all ill. And second, re-examine our Christian heritage and make the best of it. The tribute paid to Renee Nicole Good in Minneapolis is witness to goodness indeed. Renee was a Christian who knew that all religions teach the same essential truth. We are here to love each other, care for each other, and keep each other safe and whole.